wind came first, dry and restless, tumbling grit across the empty street of Gallow Bend. It rattled loose shutters and hissed against warped siding, whispering like it carried someone's last words. Jonas Creed sat outside the saloon, one boot propped on a rail, the other planted square, his weight favoring it. The limp was old now, old enough to become part him, but it still sang on cold mornings. He rolled a silver coin across his knuckles, the metal dulled to a weary shine. Each turn caught a sliver of the dying sun, slicing gold through whiskey-glass shadows. Men who didn't know better might think it a habit. Men who did knew it was the only thing that still had the power to burn him. The stage from Abilene clattered in, axles groaning, dust boiling around the wheels. Jonas watched the driver snap the reins like he meant to split the air, watched the door swing open and a woman step down. She moved like someone testing the ground after a long storm, cautious but unwilling to look afraid. Her dress was travel-worn, the hem gritted with trailed dust, but it was the way she held her jaw that caught Jonas' attention. Straight, unyielding, a small valise in one hand, the other pressed protectively against the curve of her belly. Two men stood across the street, one leaning on a hitching post, the other against a water barrel. They traded a few words, a quick glance, then turned their eyes to her, the kind of look that measured a person not by their worth, but by what they might be worth. Jonas slipped the coin back into his pocket and pushed himself to standing. The limp made the motion slow, deliberate. Marshal Wade Hollis came around the corner just then, hat low over eyes that were sharp even in shade. "You're early at the saloon, Creed," he said, voice a mix of gravel and drawl. "Maybe I'm just thirsty," Jonas answered. The marshal's gaze slid to the woman, then back. "She's not yours to trouble. Wasn't planning on it." But Wade didn't look convinced, and Jonas couldn't blame him, not with the history between them. Blood in a rain-soaked alley in Dodge, a job gone wrong, the kind of silence that buys a man his freedom but never his absolution. The woman crossed to the general store, ignoring the stares. Jonas noted how she didn't quicken her pace, didn't shrink, just walked like she'd been stared at before, and learned it never made her smaller unless she let it. From somewhere down the road, a hawk cried, thin and high, fading into the wind. Jonas looked up in time to see it wheel against the sinking sun, a black curve against a fire-brushed sky. When she came out of the store, her valise was heavier, the weight of it tugging at her arm. One of the two men from before, broad-shouldered, had pushed back like arrogance made flesh, stepped in her path. "Ma'am," he said, drawing out the word until it felt wrong in the air. "That the dress you wore for your groom-to-be?" Her eyes narrowed, and for a moment Jonas thought she'd spit something sharp enough to cut him. Instead, she stepped around without answering. "You hear about him?" The man called after her. Changed his mind. Didn't want what you're already carrying. Jonas felt the street tighten. Conversations faltered on porches. The wind pressing close. The woman stopped, half-turned. Her face was still, but her hand on the valise was white-knuckled. She kept walking. The man spat in the dust, turned toward his partner, and that's when Jonas moved. He didn't say much, just enough of the words to find their mark. "Ain't smart to pick at snakes." The man's eyes flared. "You calling her a snake?" Jonas let the pause hang. "Calling you the kind who don't live long if they keep poking." Wade Hollis was there again, quicker than seemed possible, his shadow falling over both men. "Creed," he said evenly, "you keep looking for trouble, and it's going to stop being trouble and start being grave." Jonas smiled without humor. "Good thing I'm not the one looking." The woman was already halfway to the boarding house, the fading light catching in her hair. For a moment, Jonas thought she glanced back at him, but maybe it was just the wind shifting the brim of her hat. That night, the saloon was quieter than usual. Jonas sat at his usual table near the wall, nursing a glass more for its heat than its contents. The silver coin rested on the table, the edge catching lamplight like a wink from something half-buried. Silas Morn came in late, his burn-scarred hand gripping the doorframe as though testing the room before stepping in. He spotted Jonas, walked over. "You made friends today?" Silas said, voice low. "Don't recall shaking any hands." Silas leaned on the table. "A woman like that, pregnant, Alone, she's gonna draw wolves. Some wear hats. Some wear badges. Jonas took a slow sip. And which are you? Silas' mouth twitched. Almost a smile, almost something else. Depends who's a skin. Before Jonas could answer, the sound came. Not loud, but sharp enough to slice through the clink of glasses and the low murmur of cards. A single shot, somewhere up the street. Then silence, heavy as wet canvas. Wade was out the door first, his hand hovering over his holster. Jonas followed, the limp biting deeper with each step. The street was darker now, the moon a thin sliver behind tattered clouds. They found the source near the boarding house. A man sprawled in the dirt, chest blooming dark. The two from earlier were nowhere in sight. On the porch, Evelyn Ashford stood with a pistol in her hand. Smoke curled from the barrel, her eyes steady on the men approaching. He came at the door, she said, voice flat. Didn't knock. Wade took the gun, checked the chamber. 1 round spent. She nodded. Other man. Jonas asked. Her gaze flicked to him, unreadable. Ran. The hawk cried again overhead, unseen in the dark. Jonas felt the wind shift cold, like the land itself had taken a side, and wasn't saying whose. Somewhere far off, thunder muttered, not loud enough to threaten yet, but promising it would. The body was gone by morning. The boarding house porch had been scrubbed, but the grain still held a faint shadow where the blood had seeped in. A wet line of sawdust marked where someone had swept the dirt. Jonas stood in the street, collar turned up against the dawn wind that smelled of rain, though the sky was still cloudless. Across the way, Evelyn Ashford stepped out, her hair braided tight, a plain wool coat covering the shape of her belly. She carried no gun now, only a small basket. Silas Morn was leaning against a post near the livery, rolling a cigarette slow, one-handed. His scarred fingers worked the paper like he was folding something delicate enough to break. He watched her, too, but his eyes were the kind that weighed more than they measured. You gonna follow her? Jonas asked without looking at him, just making sure she gets where she's going. Silas struck a match with his boothiel. Town stirred up. Somebody will want payment for last night. The match flared, lighting the hollows of his face before the wind snuffed it. Jonas caught the faintest scent of tobacco and char before Silas moved off, shadowing the woman toward the mercantile. Marshall Hollis emerged from behind the saloon, coat unbuttoned, hat low. He didn't greet Jonas, just fell in step. Man she shot was named Brick Latner. Wade said, voice flat, brothers still breathing. Where? Somewhere the law don't reach quick. Wade's eyes flicked sideways. You think she's worth the trouble? Jonas said nothing. She'll tell you she shot in self-defense. Could be true. Could be she's got a trail of bodies longer than the distance she rode to get here. Wade stopped, his boots grinding in the dirt. I've seen you throw yourself in front of bullets you didn't know anyone. Usually ended up costing more than it saved. Jonas kept walking. The hawk was out again, high above, a black mark circling the pale wash of sky. By midday the storm had gathered itself on the horizon, low, bruised clouds rolling slow but steady. The air felt thick, each breath dragging heat into the lungs. In the saloon, the light was cut to amber through stained glass, the smoke from the stove curling like lazy handwriting in the rafters. Evelyn came in with Silas just behind her. She didn't sit. She went straight to the bar, set her basket down, and asked for coffee. Jonas watched her over the rim of his glass. You got a plan? Her eyes found him, steady. I've been told this was a land where a woman could start over. By who? She took the coffee, sipped. By a man who changed his mind when he found out I wasn't arriving empty. Her hand brushed her stomach briefly, almost unconsciously. He thought a child meant trouble. Jonas thought of the 2 men in the street yesterday. Trouble's already here. She didn't flinch. Then I'd best find a way to meet it standing. Wade stepped in from the heat outside, dust on his boots, his expression a ledger of bad news. Brick's brother rode in last night. Didn't stop. Where to? Jonas asked. Wade's gaze slid to Evelyn. Somewhere he figures she'll be. Silas tapped Esh into a tin cup, his tone mild. Could be's looking for you too, Creed. Jonas let the words hang. Wouldn't be the first. The first roll of thunder came mid-afternoon, a low growl that seemed to shake the window glass. By then the air had gone metallic, the taste of rain in it. Evelyn was on the porch of the boarding house when Jonas found her again, watching the street like she was waiting for something to come down it. "You any good with a rifle?" he asked. "I know which end's which." He handed her one wrapped in oilcloth. "You'll want this if you plan on staying alive." Her hands didn't tremble as she took it. "And what's your stake in it?" Jonas looked past her, to the storm front chewing its way across the prairie. "Maybe I just don't like seeing the wolves win." They waited out the heat in the stable behind the livery. The horses shifted restlessly, hooves thudding against wood. Silas stood at the open doors, watching the street. Wade leaned against a support beam, chewing on a strip of jerky like it was the only thing keeping him from saying more. "You're making a choice here," Wade said finally. "You stand with her. You stand against whoever's coming. You sure you can carry that with whatever else you're already carrying?" Jonas didn't answer right away. The coin was in his pocket, its edge warm from his thumb. "Some debts don't go away," he said at last. The rain started just before dusk. Heavy drops at first, then a sheet that blurred the street into streaks of silver. The sound on the roof was a constant drum. Somewhere outside, a horse screamed, cut short. Silas moved first, shouldering his rifle. Wade drew, the iron gleam catching a flash of lightning through the gap in the doors. Jonas stepped out into the rain, the limp making his pace uneven but no slower. 3 riders came out of the dark, water running off their slickers, hats low against the downpour. The one in the middle, thick through the shoulders, a shotgun in hand, pulled up short in front of the livery. "You Creed?" he called through the rain. "Depends who's a skin. I'm the man whose brother you let that woman kill." His voice was flat, like a verdict already passed. Jonas didn't look back, but he felt Evelyn behind him, the rifle resting against her shoulder. "You come for her, you're going to have to go through me," Jonas said. The man in the middle spat rainwater. "Then I guess I'll be sending someone to dig 2 graves." Lightning cracked, bleaching the world white for a breath. In that instant, Jonas saw the hawk again, swept low under the storm, then gone. The first shot came from Silas, sharp and sure. One of the riders jerked back, slid from the saddle. The others wheeled in the rain, shouting, the sound swallowed by thunder. Jonas moved toward the porch, putting himself between Evelyn and the street. She fired once, the rifle kicking hard, and another man tumbled into the mud. When the echoes faded, only the leader was left, his slicker plastered his frame, eyes cold as slate. He looked at Jonas for a long moment, then turned his horse and rode into the downpour without a word. The rain eased not long after, leaving the street washed clean but smelling of powder and blood. Evelyn lowered the rifle, her breath steady. "You didn't have to stand there," she said quietly. "Maybe not," Jonas replied, "but I did." Somewhere beyond the edge of town, thunder rolled again, farther off this time, but not gone. The morning after the rain, the town steamed like a forge. Puddles shimmered in wagon ruts, throwing back slices of sky, while the air clung thick as wet wool. Jonas Creed moved slow along the boardwalk, the limp heavier after the night's work. His coat, brushing damp railings, still beaded with water. The silver coin rode in his pocket, warm against his thigh, every step turning it between finger and thumb. He kept seeing the man's face, the one who'd ridden away in the downpour. There'd been no surrender in it, just the kind of patience that waits for a cleaner shot. Evelyn Ashford was at the pump in front of the boarding house, filling a tin pail. Her sleeves were rolled, hands bare, hair damp and darker at the roots. She worked without looking at him, but he could feel her awareness of his presence, like a wire pulled taut. "You sleep?" Jonas asked. I closed my eyes. She hefted the pail, water sloshing against the rim. "That's the best I've done in a while." He stepped aside to let her pass, and she didn't thank him. She didn't need to. Her silence wasn't cold. It was armor. Down the street, Silas Morn was tying down a load of hay in the back of a wagon. The burned scars on his hand shone pale against the darker skin, catching sunlight like ghost fire. He caught Jonas watching and gave the faintest nod, a gesture that could have meant "I saw you" or "we need to talk." Jonas didn't get the chance. Wade Hollis came striding from the jailhouse, a folded sheet of paper in one hand. His mouth was a straight line. "Creed," he called. Jonas turned, saw the way Wade's gaze brushed Evelyn, and then moved on. "Telegram from Abilene." Wade said, holding out the paper. "Name ring a bell?" "Luther Creed." Jonas didn't take it. "Not anymore." Wade's jaw worked. "Your brother's been sighted in Kansas territory, riding with a gang that's been working banks west of here." Evelyn had stopped walking, the pail still in her hands. "Your brother," she said, testing the weight of the words. Jonas took the paper finally, read it once, folded it, and slipped it into his coat. Blood don't make a man worth knowing. But the truth was heavier than that. Luther wasn't just a brother. He was a shadow Jonas had been trying to outrun for years, the reason the coin in his pocket burned hotter with each turn. The rest of the day dragged under the press of heat. Dust clung to damp boards, boots scuffed in slow motion, and the saloon ceiling fan spun lazy circles over men too tired to gamble properly. Evelyn came in near sundown, carrying a small wrapped bundle. She set it in front of Jonas without a word. Inside was a slice of cornbread, still warm. "You feed all your bodyguards?" he asked. Her eyes didn't soften. "You're not my bodyguard." "No," he agreed, breaking the bread in half. "Guess I'm not." She didn't leave right away, just stood there while he ate, the lamplight painting her face in amber and shadow. Finally she said, "Back in Missouri, there was a man who wanted me to marry him, said he'd take care of me." Said it enough I started to believe it. Jonas kept eating. "When I told him I was with child, he told me the best care he could get was sending me away before his name got tied to mine." She looked toward the window, where the last light was bleeding into the street. "So I came here. Thought I was leaving all the men like him behind." Jonas swallowed. "You didn't." Her gaze met his then, sharp enough to cut. "No, I didn't." That night, the hawk came down low over the rooftops, its wings slicing the moonlight. Jonas watched it from the porch of the boarding house, the coin turning in his hand. He heard the step behind him before he heard the voice. "You know he'll come back," Silas said. "Which one?" Silas leaned against the post, the night wind lifting his coat. "The one you spared in the rain. Men like that can't stand to leave a thing unfinished." Jonas nodded once. "And Luther?" Silas's pause was too long to be careless. "If he's riding this way, you'll feel him before you see him." There was something in Silas's tone that caught at the back of Jonas's mind, like a door closing in a room he hadn't entered yet. But before he could press, Silas pushed off the post and melted into the dark. The next day broke hard and bright. Jonas was at the livery checking the saddle leather when Wade came in, the set of his shoulders telling Jonas trouble had a name. "Two men were seen east of town," Wade said. "One matches the rain rider. Other one, scar on the jaw, rides with a limp in his left hand." Jonas froze. Wade's eyes narrowed. "I know that look. That your brother?" Jonas didn't answer. Evelyn appeared in the doorway then, breathless. "Someone's been in my room," she said. "Didn't take anything. Just left this." She held out a strip of oilcloth, tied with a strip of leather. Inside was a single, battered cartridge. Jonas took it, felt the weight. Not a warning, an invitation. By late afternoon, the wind was back, hot and dry, chasing grit down the main street. Jonas stood outside the saloon with Silas, scanning the road east. "You want me on the roof?" Silas asked. Jonas shook his head. "If Luther's coming, I want him where I can see his eyes." When the riders came, there were three. One was the rain rider, shotgun slung over his back. One was Luther, older now, leaner, but the same crooked smile Jonas remembered. The third hung back, face hidden in the shadow of his hat. "Brother," Luther said, reining up short. "Heard you been playing hero again." "Not my word," Jonas replied. Luther's eyes flicked to Evelyn, standing on the boardwalk. "She the reason you're still here?" Jonas said nothing, but Luther grinned like he'd heard an answer anyway. "You always did like collecting strays," Luther said. "Trouble is, strays get you shot." The wind carried the scent of dust and old rain. Somewhere far above, the hawk wheeled, silent. "Walk away, Luther," Jonas said. "Ain't no ground here worth dying on." Luther's grin didn't fade, but his eyes hardened. "We both know some debts don't get paid that way." In the silence that followed, Jonas felt it. The weight of every choice he'd made since stepping off the stage into Gallo Bend. The coin in his pocket was hot enough to brand. Wade's voice came from somewhere behind him. "We do this here, or we do it in the ground. Your call." Luther's horse shifted, muscles bunching under the saddle. The Rain Rider's hand hovered near his shotgun. And just before the moment broke, Silas said, "If anyone's dying today, we make sure it's the right man." Jonas didn't turn, but something in his chest tightened. Silas's voice carried no hesitation. No certainty, either. The storm that had been building in the air for days was finally here. Jonas could taste it on his tongue. The air between them was dry enough to crack. Jonas Creed stood in the center of Gallo Bend's main street, boots planted in dust that still held the faint trace of last night's rain. Luther sat tall in his saddle, his crooked grin a shadow of the boy Jonas had once known, the boy who'd ridden alongside him before the blood started counting. The Rain Rider shifted, shotgun hanging like a threat in the low light. The third man kept back, hat brim hiding his eyes, his silence sharper than any blade. Evelyn Ashford stood on the boardwalk, the rifle resting easy against her shoulder. Her expression was carved from something older than fear. "Last time I saw you," Luther said, "you were running." "Maybe I still am," Jonas replied. "Just stopped long enough to see you coming." Luther chuckled, low and mean. "That coin still in your pocket?" Jonas didn't answer, but Luther's eyes gleamed like he'd already felt the weight of it in his own palm. "You could have been rich," Luther said. "We had the take. We had the horses. All you had to do was squeeze the trigger and let the banker's kid die quiet. But you don't." Jonas's voice cut across the heat like a whip crack. For a moment, the only sound was the wind dragging grit along the boards. The hawk wheeled overhead, a black shadow gliding slow as judgment. Silas Morn stepped forward then, rifle held loose in his scarred hand. "You too want to settle something. Do it where the rest of us don't have to dig the holes." Luther's gaze flicked to him, narrowed. "You with him?" Silas's mouth barely moved. "For now." Jonas caught the way Evelyn's eyes tightened at that. She was reading it same as he was. Silas wasn't claiming sides. Not yet. Wade Hollis appeared from between two buildings, moving like he'd been part of the dust all along. His gun was out, but low, his eyes steady. "We're not going to have a war in my street." "Your street?" Luther smirked. "Looks to me like it's anyone's who can take it." Jonas saw the shift before it happened. The twitch of Luther's rein hand, the slight lean of the Rain Rider toward his shotgun. He stepped forward, closing the distance by 3 paces. "You rode a long way for this," Jonas said. "You want the truth? I should have killed you that night. But I didn't. And every man who died after, that's on me." Luther's smile faltered, just for a breath. Then the Rain Rider's shotgun came up. The first shot roared, tearing the quiet apart. Jonas dropped low, felt the heat of the buckshots passing like a slap. Wade's revolver barked twice, sending the Rain Rider tumbling from the saddle into the dust. The third man moved then, fast, sliding from his horse, drawing on Silas. The crack of their shots was near enough to blend into one sound. Silas staggered back, clutching his side, but stayed upright, his rifle spitting fire that took the stranger in the throat. Luther's pistol was in his hand now, leveled at Jonas. "You always were too slow," he said. Jonas didn't move toward his gun. "You kill me, you'll have her to deal with." He tilted his head toward Evelyn, who hadn't moved from the boardwalk. The rifle in her hands was steady, the muzzle black as a storm's mouth. Luther's eyes darted toward her. Just for an instant, Jonas moved. His revolver cleared leather in one smooth draw, the report punching through the air. Luther rocked in the saddle, a dark bloom spreading under his ribs. The hawk cried above them, a long, ragged note. Luther's hand found the horn of his saddle, knuckles white, breath shallow. "You should have," he didn't finish. The weight took him, and he slid from the saddle into the dirt. The wind carried the smell of blood and spent powder, sharp against the sun-baked air. Jonas stood over him, the silver coin in his hand. He let it fall onto Luther's chest, where it flashed once in the light before settling in the dust and blood. Silas leaned against the post, his shirt blooming dark at the side, eyes on Jonas. "Could have let him ride away," he said. "Could have," Jonas answered. Wade was already checking the street, making sure no one else was coming. This town's going to remember today. Evelyn stepped down from the boardwalk, the rifle still in her hands but pointed low now. She looked at Jonas for a long time, as if weighing something. "You think it's over?" she asked. Jonas glanced at Luther's still form, the coin glinting faintly in the dust. "Things like this don't end. They just stop chasing you for a while." Silas's gaze was unreadable. "Long enough to breathe?" Jonas holstered his gun. "We'll see." The sun had started its drop toward the horizon, bleeding red across the plains. The hawk circled once more before slipping into the glare. Evelyn stood beside Jonas, silent, her hand resting briefly, just briefly, on the curve of her belly. Somewhere far off, thunder murmured again, softer now, as if it found somewhere else to break. Jonas looked east, into the light, the dust still drifting in the street. "Come on," he said. "We got ground to cover." And then he started walking, the limp steady as the heartbeat of the land.